We're here today at the Museum of American Speed to talk about front-engine dragsters. Where did they even come from in the first place? And then why did they fall out of favor and get replaced with rear-engine cars? It's always hard to pinpoint the exact moment that something was invented when it comes to early drag racing, but Mickey Thompson generally gets credit as being the guy who had the idea to put the driver out behind the rear axle and therefore sort of invented the front-engine dragster. And the idea here was to increase the rear weight bias by using the driver essentially as ballast and putting him out behind the slicks because early tire technology wasn't great and it was hard to hook these cars up. And these cars came to be known as slingshots because if you look at it from the top, the driver positioned out behind the slicks looks like the rock in a slingshot. And as people started to see the success that Mickey Thompson was having with his car, the idea spread, and by the late 50s, the front-engine dragster was the dominant design in drag racing. And these were run across lots of different classes. Guys were running everything from Model B 4-cylinders to GMC 6-cylinders, all the way on up to the blown fuel hemis that we're all used to seeing in these cars. By the early 60s, these cars were going 200 miles an hour in the quarter, and as power levels increased and speeds increased, they got more and more dangerous. And on top of all of that, guys were experimenting with slipper clutches, and the idea was rather than lock the clutch and do a quarter-mile burnout, instead the clutch would slip and it would hook the car up better. The problem with that was these clutches were exploding because they were getting so hot, and that is made extra problematic by the driver's position in the car. It's not hard to look at one of these cars and kind of imagine how dangerous it must be. So the third member and the rear end housing is literally right between your legs. And the clutch and driveline and everything else that's spinning at a zillion RPM is right between your feet. And on top of all of that, the engine is literally right in front of you. Not only is it hard to see around, but if it blows up, it's all coming right back at you. This all came to a head in 1970. Don Garlits had been a famous and dominant drag racer from the beginning, and he was experimenting with a 2-speed transmission in his front engine car. And we've all seen the famous photo of him leaving the line and the transmission exploded, it sawed the car in half and cut off half of his right foot. And it caused him to really dig in and try to figure out what needed to happen to make a rear engine car work. And he had already been experimenting with a rear engine car, but the problem he was having was the steering was really twitchy on the top end. And everybody thought at the time that a rear engine car was actually more dangerous than a front engine car was. And what he figured out was all he needed to do was slow down the steering, and almost immediately he started winning races with the rear engine car. And at that point, it was clear to everyone that the days of the front engine dragster were pretty much over.